First Contact's unexpected reception. The Corvathian armada emerged from hyperspace like a school of metallic predators breaking through an invisible ocean. 23 warships, each one stretching nearly 30 kilometers from bow to stern, materialized in perfect formation around Saturn's rings. Their hulls gleamed with a crystalline blue surface that seemed to bend light around them, making them appear both solid and ethereal at the same time. These were the pride of the Corvathian hegemony, vessels that had brought 47 star systems to their knees without firing more than a warning shot. Supreme Commander, Vorthak stood at the center of his command sphere aboard the flagship Inevitable Truth. His 6 arms moved in perfect synchronization as he manipulated the holographic displays surrounding him. The Corvathian race had evolved on a high-gravity world, giving them dense musculature and an imposing 3-meter height that made most species cower in their presence. Vorthak's bronze-colored exoskeleton gleamed under the bridge's soft lighting as he studied the tactical readouts of the human solar system. The humans had been under observation for several cycles now. They were a young species, barely capable of interplanetary travel within their own system. Their largest vessels measured less than 2 kilometers in length, and their weapons technology appeared to be based on primitive kinetic projectiles and basic nuclear fission. By all calculations, this would be the easiest conquest in Corvathian history. The mathematical models predicted complete surrender within 3 of the humans' daily rotations. Station Commander. Chen Wei was in the middle of her morning Tai Chi routine when the alarm started blaring throughout Orbital Mining Station 7. The station hung in space between Earth and Mars, serving as a processing hub for the constant stream of ore being hauled in from the asteroid belt. Chen had been running this operation for 12 years, and in all that time the only excitement had been the occasional solar flare or equipment malfunction. She never expected to be humanity's first point of contact with an alien armada. Chen rushed to the command center, her magnetic boots clicking against the metal floors. Her crew was already at their stations, faces pale as they stared at the sensor readings. 23 massive contacts had appeared near Saturn, and they were moving toward Earth at a steady pace. The ships were unlike anything in their databases, clearly not of human origin. First contact protocols were theoretical exercises that everyone had trained for, but never truly expected to use. The communication system crackled to life before Chen could issue her first order. A deep, resonating voice filled the command center, speaking in surprisingly clear English with only a slight metallic undertone. The translation software was working overtime, but the message came through with crystal clarity. Vorthak's announcement echoed through every human facility in the solar system simultaneously. He had crafted this speech over many conquests, refining it to maximize psychological impact. The words rolled out with practiced precision, each syllable designed to inspire fear and submission. He spoke of the might of the Corvathian hegemony, the futility of resistance, and the generous terms of surrender that would allow humanity to serve as a productive client species. The speech lasted exactly 10 minutes and covered everything from the superior technology of the Corvathians to the mathematical certainty of human defeat. Chen Wei listened to the entire speech while her crew frantically pulled up every piece of data they could find on the alien vessels. The ships were indeed massive, with energy signatures that dwarfed anything humanity had ever produced. By all logical measures, the alien commander was right about the outcome of any potential conflict. Earth's combined military forces would be like mosquitoes against elephants. When the transmission ended, Chen's communication officer, Marcus Thompson, turned to her with an expression that was equal parts terror and amusement. The entire command center fell silent, waiting for their commander's response. Chen Wei stood there for a moment, processing everything she had just heard. Then something unexpected happened. A small chuckle escaped her lips. That chuckle grew into a laugh, and soon the entire command center was filled with nervous but genuine laughter. Marcus wiped tears from his eyes as he managed to get control of himself. "Commander, should I open a channel to respond?" Chen nodded, still grinning despite the gravity of the situation. She stepped forward to the communication console and cleared her throat. When she spoke, her voice carried across the vast distances of space to reach the Corvathian flagship. Her response was not what Vorthak had expected. Instead of fearful submission or desperate defiance, Chen Wei's voice carried a tone of genuine amusement mixed with polite confusion. She thanked the Supreme Commander for his comprehensive presentation and complimented him on the impressive nature of his fleet. However, she explained that humanity was currently in the middle of several important projects, including a Mars terraforming initiative and something called the World Cup, which apparently held great cultural significance. She suggested that perhaps the Corvathians could schedule their conquest for a more convenient time, possibly after the next fiscal quarter when humanity would have more resources to properly accommodate such distinguished visitors. Vorthak's 6 arms froze in place as he processed this response. In 300 cycles of military service, he had heard pleas for mercy, declarations of defiance, and offers of tribute. He had never encountered a species that responded to an invasion threat with scheduling concerns and polite deflection. His tactical advisor, Sub-Commander Krex, leaned forward with all 4 of his eyes blinking in confusion. The advisor suggested that perhaps the translation matrix was malfunctioning, but diagnostics showed all systems operating normally. The Supreme Commander decided that a demonstration of power was necessary. These humans clearly did not understand the severity of their situation. He ordered the weapons officer to target one of the human mining vessels currently operating in the asteroid belt. A single pulse from their primary weapon should vaporize the primitive craft and make their position clear. The brilliant beam of coherent energy lanced across space, striking the human mining vessel Rockhound directly. The Corvathians watched their tactical displays, expecting to see the ship disappear in a flash of vaporized metal. Instead, something extraordinary happened. The mining vessel's hull seemed to shimmer and dance as the energy beam struck it. Layers of what appeared to be random debris and scrap metal began burning away from the ship's surface, absorbing and dissipating the energy. When the beam finally cut off, the Rockhound was still there, scarred but intact. Captain Sarah Martinez aboard the Rockhound checked her displays and shook her head with a grin. Her ship's unconventional armor had performed exactly as designed. Years of operating in the asteroid belt had taught human engineers that traditional armor was expensive and heavy. Instead, they had developed a technique of welding layers of space junk, old equipment, and processed asteroid material to their hulls. This junk shield approach meant that ships could be constantly repaired and upgraded using whatever materials were handy. It was ugly, inefficient by most standards, and absolutely brilliant for absorbing directed energy weapons. Sarah opened a communication channel to the alien fleet. Her voice was cheerful, with only a hint of strain from the recent attack. She informed the Corvathians that while she appreciated the light show, her crew was on a tight deadline to deliver their ore shipment. She mentioned that if the aliens damaged her ship too badly, she would have to file an insurance claim, and the paperwork alone would take weeks to process. She asked if the Corvathians had liability coverage for acts of interstellar warfare, because her insurance company would definitely want to know. The bridge of the inevitable truth fell into stunned silence. Sub-Commander Krex ran the tactical analysis 3 times, unable to comprehend how a vessel made primarily of refined metals and welded debris had survived a direct hit from their primary weapon. The energy readings made no sense according to conventional shield technology. It was as if the humans had deliberately designed their ships to fall apart in layers, each one absorbing damage while protecting the core structure underneath. Vorthak's initial confidence was beginning to waver. These humans were not responding according to any known pattern of behavior. They treated an invasion force like a minor inconvenience. Their ships survived attacks that should have been instantly fatal, and they seemed more concerned about insurance paperwork than the threat of annihilation. He ordered his fleet to advance toward Earth, determined to force these bizarre creatures to take the situation seriously. As the Corvathian armada moved deeper into the solar system, Chenwei was busy coordinating with every human facility and vessel in the area. The conversation was not about military strategy or evacuation procedures. Instead, they were discussing something called Operation Pinball, which apparently involved every piece of space junk, derelict satellite, and abandoned equipment in Earth's orbit. The humans had been meaning to clean up their orbital space for decades, but now they saw an opportunity to put all that debris to creative use. Vorthak watched the debris field with growing unease. His tactical computers could not identify any weapon signatures, but something about the movement patterns felt wrong. The debris was not attacking, but it was not dispersing either. It was almost as if the humans were orchestrating some kind of elaborate dance with their space junk. The Supreme Commander ordered his fleet to maintain formation and continue toward Earth. Whatever primitive trick the humans were planning, it could not possibly threaten vessels of Corvathian construction. The art of chaotic defense, the Corvathian armada maintained its impressive formation as it approached Earth's orbital space. Supreme Commander Vorthak had regained his composure after the initial confusion, convincing himself that the humans' strange behavior was simply a symptom of their primitive understanding of warfare. No species could truly be as cavalier about invasion as these humans appeared to be. It had to be some form of psychological defense mechanism, a way of coping with their inevitable defeat. Sub-Commander Krex monitored the tactical displays with growing concern. The debris field around Earth was not behaving according to any predictable pattern. Objects would drift along normal orbital paths, then suddenly fire small bursts from attached thrusters, changing direction seemingly at random. The movements were too coordinated to be accidental, but too chaotic to be a conventional defense grid. It was like watching a three-dimensional puzzle where the pieces kept rearranging themselves without any apparent purpose. Chen Wei stood in the command center of Orbital Mining Station 7, watching multiple screens that showed the positions of every piece of trackable debris in Earth's orbit. Her team had spent the last 6 hours coordinating with dozens of facilities, private companies, and even a few hobbyist satellite operators. The plan they had assembled was completely insane by conventional military standards, which was exactly why Chen believed it might work. Humans had learned long ago that when you cannot match an opponent's strength, you had to get creative with whatever resources you had available. The first phase of Operation Pinball began when the Corvathian fleet crossed the orbit of the Moon, an old communications satellite that had been defunct for 30 years, suddenly came to life, broadcasting a single message on all frequencies. The message was a 15-minute advertisement for a company that had gone bankrupt decades ago, complete with jingles and customer testimonials. The Corvathians' communication systems automatically began translating and analyzing the transmission, trying to determine if it contained hidden military codes or tactical data. While the aliens were distracted by the advertisement, 3 derelict space stations began a controlled deorbit burn. These stations had been abandoned for years, but human engineers had quietly been installing small thruster packages on them for the past few hours. The stations were not aimed at the Corvathian ships directly. Instead, they were calculated to pass through the fleet's formation at specific angles, forcing the massive warships to adjust their positions to avoid collisions. Vorthak watched with annoyance as his perfectly organized fleet had to break formation to avoid the falling stations. The objects posed no real threat to his ship's shields, but regulations required avoiding unnecessary impacts that could affect sensor calibration. As the fleet adjusted, more debris began moving. Old solar panels, communication arrays, and even a few ancient space telescopes started drifting into new orbits, each one requiring minor course corrections from the Corvathian vessels. The beauty of Operation Pinball was its simplicity. Humans did not need to destroy the alien ships. They just needed to make approaching Earth as annoying and complicated as possible. Every piece of debris that moved required the Corvathians to recalculate their approach vectors. Every random transmission forced their computers to analyze potential threats. Every unexpected maneuver burned a tiny amount of their fuel reserves. Captain Marcus Jefferson commanded the Earth Defense Corvette Stubborn Mule, one of humanity's few actual warships. His vessel was 1/10 the size of the smallest Corvathian ship, armed with railguns and nuclear missiles that would barely scratch the alien hulls. But Marcus was not planning to fight conventionally. His crew had spent the last hour attaching magnetic grapples to several large pieces of debris, including an old orbital manufacturing platform that had been abandoned after a corporate merger. The Stubborn Mule accelerated toward the Corvathian fleet, dragging the manufacturing platform behind it like a giant metallic tail. As they approached the flagship, Marcus ordered his crew to release the grapples and fire their emergency thrusters. The Corvette veered sharply away while the platform continued on its original trajectory, spinning wildly as it tumbled toward the inevitable truth. The platform was not a weapon, just 3,000 tons of metal and ceramic moving at considerable velocity. Vorthak's weapons officer asked for permission to destroy the incoming debris, but the Supreme Commander hesitated. His sensors showed no explosives, no energy signatures, just inert metal. Destroying it would create a cloud of smaller fragments that could interfere with their sensors for hours. Instead, he ordered the ship to adjust position and let the platform pass harmlessly by. It was the logical choice, exactly what the humans had anticipated. As the inevitable truth moved to avoid the platform, it triggered a cascade of movements throughout the fleet. Ships had to adjust to maintain safe distances from each other, which put them into the paths of other pieces of moving debris. Soon the entire Corvathian armada was engaged in an elaborate dance, trying to maintain some semblance of formation while navigating through an ever-changing field of human space junk. Chen Wei watched the alien fleet's movements with satisfaction. The Corvathians were clearly superior in terms of technology and firepower, but they were also rigid in their thinking. They expected warfare to follow certain rules and patterns. Humans, on the other hand, had learned to be flexible and adaptable. When you spent your entire history fighting each other with whatever was handy, you got very good at improvisation. The second phase of Operation Pinball involved the activation of the rubber duck protocol. This was possibly the most ridiculous part of the entire defense plan, which was saying something. Years ago, a cargo ship carrying novelty items had suffered a catastrophic failure, spilling its contents into orbit. Among the lost cargo were approximately 50,000 rubber ducks, originally intended for a charity event. These ducks had been orbiting Earth ever since, occasionally causing minor problems when they impacted satellites or spacecraft. Some enterprising engineers had decided to weaponize the ducks. Not with explosives or advanced technology, but with simple radio transmitters. Each duck was fitted with a tiny device that broadcast random signals on multiple frequencies. When activated simultaneously, 50,000 ducks created an electromagnetic storm that made clear communication nearly impossible. The signals were not jamming in the traditional sense, just an overwhelming amount of noise that made it difficult to filter out actual messages. The Corvathian fleet suddenly found their communication systems overwhelmed with countless signals, each one translating to nonsense phrases about bath time, squeaky sounds, and requests to feed breadcrumbs. Their advanced translation matrices tried desperately to find meaning in the chaos, convinced that no species would broadcast such meaningless data during a military engagement. Surely it had to be some form of code or psychological warfare. Vorthak's frustration reached new heights as his bridge crew reported communication failures throughout the fleet. Ships were having trouble coordinating their movements, leading to several near collisions. The tactical display was cluttered with thousands of small contacts, each one broadcasting its inane message about rubber ducks. The Supreme Commander had conquered dozens of worlds, faced countless enemy fleets, and never once had he been this confused and annoyed during a battle. Sub-Commander Krek suggested that they simply destroy everything in orbit and start fresh. It would take considerable ammunition, but it would clear the path to Earth. Vorthak was about to agree when Chen Wei's voice cut through the communication chaos, somehow finding a clear channel among the duck signals. Her tone was still pleasant, almost apologetic, as she explained that destroying all the debris would create an even worse situation. The resulting fragments would form a cascade of impacts, creating what she called Kessler syndrome, essentially turning Earth's orbit into a permanent barrier of high-velocity shrapnel. She went on to explain that humans had been dealing with this orbital debris problem for decades. They had become experts at navigating through it, predicting its movements, and even using it to their advantage. She suggested that perhaps the Corvathians might want to reconsider their approach. After all, conquering a planet was not very useful if you could never safely reach it through the cloud of debris surrounding it. The truth was beginning to dawn on Vorthak. These humans had not built powerful weapons or advanced shields. Instead, they had turned their own mess into a defense system. They had weaponized chaos itself, creating a situation where superior firepower and technology were almost useless. It was like trying to use a sword to fight a swarm of bees. Technically possible, but frustratingly ineffective. The Supreme Commander made one last attempt to salvage the situation. He ordered all ships to charge their main weapons and target Earth directly. If he could not occupy the planet, he would destroy it as an example to other primitive species. The weapons of 23 Corvathian warships began to glow with accumulated energy, enough firepower to crack continents and boil oceans. Chen Wei's response was immediate and unexpected. She burst out laughing over the communication channel, a genuine, hearty laugh that echoed through the bridge of every Corvathian ship. When she finally caught her breath, she explained that Earth had detected the energy buildup and automatically activated their final defensive measure. Every nuclear power plant on the planet had been rigged with a dead man's switch. If Earth was destroyed, the resulting explosion would not just eliminate the planet but would trigger a reaction in the sun itself, potentially destabilizing the entire solar system. This was, of course, a complete lie. Humans had no such capability, and Chen Wei was bluffing with the confidence of someone holding a pair of twos in poker while pretending to have a royal flush. But she delivered the lie with such casual certainty, mixed with genuine amusement at the situation, that the Corvathians' threat assessment algorithms could not definitively classify it as false. She continued, suggesting that perhaps instead of mutual annihilation, they could discuss trade agreements. Humans had plenty of resources from asteroid mining, and they were always interested in new technology. She mentioned that Earth's coffee and chocolate were particularly popular trade goods, and she would be happy to send over some samples. The offer was made as if the last hour of chaos had been a friendly misunderstanding rather than an attempted invasion. Vorthak found himself at an impossible decision point. His fleet was tangled in debris, unable to communicate effectively, facing an enemy that refused to act like an enemy. These humans were either the most brilliant tactical minds he had ever encountered or completely insane. Possibly both. The mathematical models for this engagement had completely broken down, showing error messages where victory percentages should be. After a long moment of consideration, the Supreme Commander made a decision that would be studied in Corvathian military academies for generations. He ordered his weapons to stand down and requested a formal meeting with the human representatives. Not a surrender, not a retreat, but a recognition that conventional conquest was impossible when the enemy refused to play by conventional rules. The meeting took place on Orbital Mining Station 7, with Chen Wei serving as humanity's primary representative. Vorthak transported over with a small honor guard, his massive frame barely fitting through the human-sized corridors. When they finally sat down at the negotiation table, Chen offered him coffee and chocolate as promised. The Supreme Commander, who had never tasted either substance, found them surprisingly pleasant. The negotiations that followed were unlike any in Corvathian history. Instead of discussing terms of surrender or tribute, they talked about trade routes, cultural exchange, and mutual defense pacts. Chen Wei explained that humans were not opposed to joining a larger galactic community, but they insisted on doing so as equals, not as subjects. She pointed out that humanity's unconventional approach to problems could be valuable to the hegemony, offering solutions that more rigid thinking might miss. Vorthak found himself actually warming to these strange creatures. Their chaotic nature was frustrating but also refreshing. They approached problems from angles he never would have considered. Their technology was primitive, but their creativity was boundless. By the end of the negotiations, he had agreed to establish Earth as a sovereign trade partner with the Corvathian hegemony, the first such arrangement in their history. As the Corvathian fleet prepared to leave, Vorthak asked Chen Wei one final question. Had the humans really rigged their planet to destroy the solar system? Or was that a bluff? Chen smiled and offered him another piece of chocolate instead of answering. Some mysteries, she said, were better left unsolved. It kept relationships interesting. The Supreme Commander departed with his fleet, carrying trade agreements instead of conquest declarations. The story of the laughing humans who defeated an invasion with space junk and rubber ducks would spread throughout the galaxy, cementing Earth's reputation as a planet best approached with caution and a sense of humor. No one wanted to invade a species that could weaponize chaos itself and laugh while doing it. In the end, humanity had proven that sometimes the best defense was not powerful weapons or advanced technology. Sometimes it was the ability to look at an impossible situation and find the ridiculous solution that no one else would even consider. The Corvathians had come expecting to find primitive creatures cowering in fear. Instead, they found humans, and humans, as the galaxy would soon learn, were anything but predictable.